I'm excited to hear your story. I reached out to you. You work on the Apex team. You were part of the live ops team, and clearly that game lives and breathes live ops. And as we're talking, you're telling me you're part of the build and release team, which again I think is super fascinating because you're releasing many versions of the game across many platforms, and I guess it makes sense. There's a process behind that. But from the outside looking in, I never really thought about it. Like, oh, someone needs to do that. So before we dive too deep into it, can you kind of give me the rundown and what is your day to day like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, right? Somebody has to get the game out the door to our players. The way that I describe my team and what we do to the average person is we're really responsible for that very tail end of getting the game out the door. We don't necessarily do like this super operations piece of triaging for live bugs and things like that. But when the live bugs come, our team is the one that springs into action and determines, hey, how are we going to fix this? Who do we need to get involved? And what's the best way of the many levers that we have to be able to get content out to our players? Which one of those makes the most sense for us to get these fixes or content out as quickly as possible, right? So it's a little problem solving, it's a little tactical. I really enjoy it because it is, kind of high pressure, moving fast. I feel like it's fast problem solving, which I really enjoy, and kind of how this piqued my interest in the beginning. But yeah, I mean, we have to get that content out the door for our players. And we also have to make sure that everything inside the house, in terms of making sure our developers and our engineers and our artists have everything that they need to be able to do, their tests, and make sure that what we're sending out there is valid for our players, right? That's also part of build and release too.
Hey, if you're liking this video so far, if you wouldn't mind liking it or sharing it with a friend you might think might enjoy it as well, it goes a long way and we'd be much appreciated.
Our support teams and customer supports are really the ones who are coming to us. I think all that data is really interesting, so I almost wish I was more involved, but we have a whole team of specialists who are the ones listening. And then they kind of hit, they throw up the bat signal, if you will. And they're like, okay, we have a thing, call, build, and release, right? So
All right. So just to kind of draw a picture here, right? Can you tell me if there's a launch, the new season of Apex is going to come out? What's going on? Who are you working with? Who are you collaborating with? What's your day to day like then?
yeah, and I think it's probably no different than a lot of live service games out there, but it's we're in full testing overload. Right now is the time for our QB partners and folks to be able to catch, the big rocks, right? So testing is happening. We're finding those high priority bugs and blockers and trying to get them in before launch. Obviously, you always want to you always want to get that stuff done before launch. The other people that we're actually talking with would be, our partners at Nintendo and Sony and Microsoft, right? You don't just take the game and throw it on the Xbox marketplace, right? Like you have to get approval, right? You have to make sure that a game, your anyone's game can't be so large that it's going to take up somebody's entire, disk space on their console, right? I mean, you need to make sure that it's stable. You need to make sure that whatever, icon for the game store is legit, right? It's goes from like really small things to really big things, like the size, right? That's Nintendo and Sony and Microsoft are picking on everybody in that regard, right? Because hard drives aren't infinite space.
Can we dig a little deeper into what fast feedback means?
It's a combination of several things, right? It's making sure that we have good monitoring in place, and that's not done by my team for live development. That's our operations team, right? So they have great monitoring in place to be able to sense whether it's console specific issues, again, client server, those types of things. And then honestly, the other the other thing is Reddit and Twitter, right? If you're trying to listen to your players, you got to go where they're at. You would not, it would not shock you, I think, but it could shock some people how many bugs that sometimes are just their niche and they might be missed in some of our monitoring, or we can't come up with a definitive pattern. But all of a sudden you get a post on Reddit that just keeps getting upvoted, and you're like, okay, we need to look at this, right? So I think that part's fascinating, just as I think just an extrovert, and I think people are fascinating. I would love to just be more involved in that just for the sake of being nosy. I think it's fascinating, but yeah, there are people who are combing through social media and Reddit to try and figure out, okay, what are people saying? Not just, sentiment is also important, but right after a release, it is about trying to catch the things that people are talking about.
Yeah, we used to use this tool called Affogato. It's a social listening tool, and you would just basically set it up on different forums, right, to hear what is your sentiment on different channels. Because it baffles my mind how many studios I work with still ignore Reddit. They don't think it's a thing. I'm just
No,
like,
it's such a
some of
thing.
the most gamer people are on Reddit, but not social media. So a lot of people hate social media, but they're still on Reddit, and they're still like, and there's so much crap on there, and a lot of it's just crap, but at the same time, like you said, a bug that you would have maybe never found before that's getting upvoted. Like, if you could nip that before it reaches that number one rank on Reddit and save yourself a pain in the ass later, it is so worth it.
So at Florida, I was a double major for finance and for information systems. And I needed to figure out what I wanted to do with that. Did I want to go, to big banks? I lived in New York at the time. I could, go into the city every day like my dad did, right? Be like a finance bro or whatever, right? Do I want to do that, or do I want to get more into the tech space and utilize the information systems side of my degree? And that's ultimately what I decided to do. I applied for a bunch of internships across the board, and I ended up getting the one at USAA. And it's funny you talk about USAA and their technology. That also applies to their people. Their IT intern program, they hire like 300 something interns, and then their goal is to take those interns and hire them full time. That is a huge pipeline, along with their veterans pipelines, but their out of college pipeline is huge for their engineers. So that was kind of how I got involved. I got the internship. I did pretty okay, and that's how I was able to get the job full time there. And I was a hands-on engineer for about a year, and then I started to kind of pivot because of a little bit more of my business acumen. It was a business degree. I wanted to get an MBA. I have that skill set where I feel that I can translate really well between technical speak and what my engineers are trying to say versus requirements and business value and business props, right? So that was my sweet spot. So they started pulling me more into architectural conversations, more early in the pipeline of development of, hey, how are we going to solve this problem? How long is it going to take? And so I got into architecture. And so I was a systems architect for several years. And, I loved San Antonio. San Antonio has a special place in my heart, but it's a little too sleepy for me. Go Spurs, go for sure. But it was just not the best fit for me. And so I started looking at jobs in Austin, which is only, for those who don't have a map, it's like 70 miles from San Antonio. So it's pretty close. And I've always had a passion for games, right? I had a GameCube and a PS1 growing up. I have vivid memories of my dad playing Sega Genesis growing up, and I would watch, like, as 4 years old, watch him, throw Scar over Pride Rock kind of thing on Lion King, right? So video games have always been my passion. And when I knew I wanted to move and change jobs, I started looking at jobs that I had more of a passion for, right? I'm not military. I don't have that drive and that passion like a lot of USA members and employees do. I wanted to find something where I could feel that same passion. So I looked, I saw EA had an office in Austin, and I said, why the hell not, right? So I did. I shot my shot. I applied for one role as a solutions architect over in EAIT, and I guess the rest is history. That's how I got here. That's how I got my foot in the door. And I looked internally, and I saw release manager for build and release for Apex. And I actually did a talk about this internally for one of our resource groups, but I call it connecting your dots because, yeah, I hadn't done live ops before. I had not formally been a manager before, but I had all these other experiences leading compliance teams at USAA, managing unprecedented situations, the problem solving, the mass amount of collaboration I've had to do in my previous roles. And I was able to tie that to what Apex was looking for build and release, right? So I call it connecting your dots because it's taking your experiences and tying it to exactly what's being asked for, because no one's going to make those correlations for you. You have to do that if you're looking to move or change roles or get a new role. So I was able to do that, and I work with an amazing team who's basically exactly the same from when I joined 2.5 years ago. We have one of the most tenured teams within Respawn, which is amazing. And yeah, that was a great jump, and I'm so glad I did it. I love the work. I do love the team. Yeah, I'm incredibly fortunate. I think the sign of a good manager, even director, is to clear that path for them so that they can do everything that they need to, that you hired them for, right? I'm definitely not a micromanagey leader because I make sure that we hire folks who are borderline self-sufficient, right? And I clear the way. I kind of like put them on the track and say, go do your thing, right? Do the thing that you are great at and that we brought you on to do.
Your role is to remove the roadblocks for others. Let them do what they need to do. That's what a great manager does, is it removes roadblocks. And managing people is a whole different skill set. We've talked about this a lot than anything else that you've done, right? Some people just want to go into management because they're like, oh, I want to be a manager and they make more money. Like, it is a completely different skill set. If you're a coder, you're not going to want to be a manager because it's very different skill sets, right? And you're not necessarily going to get paid. So I think that's awesome how you put that. You work what I would imagine is a stressful job. You have releases coming out, previous releases. What do you do to mentally stay as sane as you can?
But just on the day to day, knowing I'm surrounded by folks who I can trust, who are incredibly competent, and then also care about their leaders' sanity and mental health, I think that speaks volumes, right? Having that mutual care back and forth of, if I see somebody working really early, engineers sometimes they'll submit code at like midnight and like you can see that. And I don't micromanage, but I say, are you okay? Right? Are you good? That's everyone's adults, right? So that's the extent of what I want to ask is just make sure they're okay. So yeah, having that back and forth. And I think the other thing is that we have millions of players who count on us, right? Who love Apex, and I love that. But at the end of the day, nobody's gonna die, right? Like it's gonna be okay. And my team has actually personally gone through some tragedies in their personal lives over the past 16 months, and that just brings it all back around. We're all people, right? And I'm so grateful that both Respawn and EA took care of these folks in their times of need. And the team was able to rally and make sure, you know, you don't want to talk about their work in these situations, right? But making sure that these things were covered and that they didn't feel any stress, right? Um, so when those types of things happen, it really brings it back to we're all people just on this big spinning rock going through space. And we're all just trying to do our best and make it one day at a time.
That's so well said. I spoke with a while ago Ryan Burnett. He's the studio director for Respawn Madison, and he said the same thing. He's like, he preaches work-life balance. When you go home for the day, you shouldn't have to worry about looking at your computer anymore. Your work day is done. And yes, there'll be those times where you have to jump on the weekend at nighttime. It's just part of your job, right? But the truth is, you need that work-life balance, and when you have that, you're going to stay at that company. And it's so great to hear that from EA, is that like you have that, they provide you those resources, they give you that ability.
Right. And something I do really love about Apex is anyone can pick up a controller and look at the legends for Apex and find something there that they resonate with. Even Pathfinder, who's a robot, right? Like I think there's still people who will pick up that controller and find something that they can resonate with. And I love that people think that any creator makes diverse characters just to be like PC, but it's not about that. It's about, again, having, the teenage girl who just wants to play games be able to pick up that controller. Maybe she resonates with Lifeline. Like, that's cool, right? That's a cool thing to be able to tie yourself to the game that you're playing, right? These games are escapes, both emotionally and sometimes even physically, if you kind of lock yourself in a dark room, right? I mean, these games are ways to spark joy and bring you away from the reality of things that are going on. And when you can get sucked into a character that reminds you of you, that's just not I was on something there, Greg. um you know
Hey, if you enjoyed today's episode, we do conversations with people all across the gaming ecosystem. We talk with artists and producers and studio directors and everything in between. So be sure to like and follow Player Driven and keep up with what's going on in the gaming industry.